All right. Well, hello to everyone. Welcome. I'm here with another interview today. We're talking with Diana Humble, another one of my very, very good friends. Here, Diana is here with me in the Department of Film and Communication, or Communication and Film, I should say, with the University of Memphis. Like me, she is a fourth year. She is now a PhD candidate, ABD, here, which is something I have not yet managed to become with the Department of Corrections, Department of Communication. Here, old habits die hard here. But she just relatively recently defended her prospectus and is now off and running with her dissertation. Diana also recently was the winner of the very first Department of Communication and Film Outstanding Student Service Award. We'll be talking all about that as well. But Diana, first, congratulations for all you're accomplishing with your work, and thank you so much for joining me today and talking.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me on and it's always a pleasure to get to talk about my work with people and just share a little bit about what's going on inside of academia because it can be a bit of an isolating kind of chamber. So being able to like open that up and share with those around is so fun.
Absolutely. And, that's no doubt true, but I've got to say, my experience here at the PhD, I just could not feel more fortunate with the cohort I got dropped in with, with you and Sam and Sneha and others that were with. I have never felt a bit of negative competitiveness. There's an urge to keep
Agree.
up, with you guys, and to, be as strong as you guys are. But I never feel a need or drive to compete, like it from a scarcity standpoint with.
Yeah.
I've always felt a real sense of community. I've always felt really encouraged by you guys. I just could not be more grateful for the people that I'm doing this with, yourself included. I think as we talk about service, we'll talk more about what that's looked like. But first, I want to start with. Uh, I'm sure we've had this discussion before, but how did you get into studying communication? And how did you know this was something you wanted to get into?
Communicate My journey into communication is like anything but intentional in a lot of ways. When I went to my undergraduate institution, Waldorf University, I was very lucky to be offered a full scholarship because of my creative writing abilities and experiences and publications and whatnot. And so I was planning to go purely for a creative writing degree. And as soon as I got there, I was like touring the institution, chatting with people. I met with someone in the honors college that I'd also been accepted into, and they were talking to me about how, this is a great thing to have in your back pocket, your communication or your creative writing degree. You might you might be bored. You might not have enough to do. It might be also a good backup plan to have something else if creative writing doesn't end up working out for you. And in my institution, I met with the communications with an S, plural, program, and I thought it would be a good fit because it was a lot of what I enjoyed doing that kind of coupled well with creative writing. In communications at that program, I was studying digital media. I was doing graphic design, journalism, public relations, and I really enjoyed that kind of hands-on exposure to it. And when I transitioned into my master's program, I didn't realize that there is a difference between a communications and a communication program. I didn't know. I applied to what I thought was a communications program at my master's at the University of South Dakota. And I was so shocked when I got there and they're asking me to write research papers and they're asking me to do lots of like hands-on teaching with giving speeches.
Hmm?
And I was totally, I don't want to say blindsided because it was my own fault for not looking super far into the program and looking at like through all the classes and whatnot. But I'll cut myself a little slack. It was during COVID, and I applied to go to grad school like I think the April before the August term started. They were taking like late applications, so I just like kind of snuck in there. I didn't do a ton of research on it. I just didn't have a job offer because mine got kind of rescinded or taken back at that time. So I had to figure something out. And it ended up being going to a communication program. And then once I got there at the University of South Dakota, I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. I kind of like this. I really liked teaching. And that's what propelled me into this PhD, even though I really just stumbled into communication over communications.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little about? I mean, I sort of remember, but especially for those who are watching and might not be, in the communication world with us, you know, tell us a little bit more about that distinction, in programs between communications programs and communication program.
Yeah, I the way I th think about it is communications looks at like very specific types of media and how you can become skilled and proficient in using them. Like I became very skilled in public relations and journalism, graphic design, and digital media. Versus communication looks at everything on a more macro scale. We're looking at the study of message, sending and receiving on a large scale.
Sure, absolutely. I think that's really well said. Now, at some point in there, uh, remind me, you worked for the Mayo Clinic for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, how did that come about?
I worked for Mayo Clinic when I was in my undergraduate degree. I was really lucky to get offered an internship after my sophomore year of undergrad, and I really loved the team I was working with. So I was super excited when they offered me another internship after my junior year, and they ended up signing me on as an independent contractor through my senior year. And it was awesome. I worked with Mayo Clinic's education innovation team within the School of Continuous Professional Development, where I was creating or helping my team create digital assets to support continuing medical education and for nurses, physicians. And that for me ended up being I worked with the podcasting team with getting that up and running. I worked with a lot of web design. I did a lot of web design. I did a lot of video editing. It was a really good time. I got to put all of my communications, plural, skills to use.
Absolutely. Yes. I was going to say, I mean, that really seems like something that drew on the communications degree and experience you had. Uh,
Absolutely.
what an amazing journey. Now, as you've come farther into the world of communication, of studying message, of studying of studying all this wonderful stuff that we do, you have really transitioned into writing about and researching about the manosphere and incel communities. Tell us how that research interest emerged for you.
Yeah. Going back to, it kind of starts back in my master's program, not that specific strain of research, but when I figured out what I really wanted to study, it kind of came back to identity, but more so identities that were self-selected and went against societal norms. So why would you choose to identify as something that's going to get you a lot of flack from mainstream society? And I was really interested in kind of delving deeper into that understanding, and that brought me to in my master's where I looked at individuals who wrote fan fiction that contained rape and sexual assault against a character that that author wrote to embody like encapsulate themselves. So they were choosing to write fan fiction that was like about themselves or self-insert character being raped or sexually assaulted. So I was really interested in why would you do that? Why would you be interested in that? And that interest in choosing that strain of identity, it kind of carried through to this doctoral program in unique ways. And I think there's a lot of reasons to study the manosphere. Like looking at current events, it's woven through so much of what we see in the political and social sphere. And
Mhm.
I think it's so timely and so relevant and really interesting to dig into.
I couldn't I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Boy, there's so many different directions I want to take us into now. All of them. I just can't wait to dig into this. So let's talk specifically. I mean, so like as we talked about at the beginning, you are now off and running on your dissertation. Why don't you tell us specifically what you're looking at with your dissertation? I think we'll use that as kind of a springboard. Uh,
Yeah.
some of these other things. Go ahead.
So my dissertation, I'm going to be looking at women who were formerly in relationships with men that identified with being part of the manosphere. I'm going to be interviewing those individuals to see what it's like to be in a relationship with a man of the manosphere, because the caricature that we paint of manosphere men is that they are lonely and desolate, dusty corners of the internet and not really interacting with individuals in the real world, and they're definitely not interacting with women, right? But that's far from the truth. That's far from what we see. And that characterization only really encompasses perhaps the most extreme corners of the manosphere. But we have to look at all of the nodes along that spectrum because all of them have the capacity to normalize patriarchal narratives and spread those to young men and boys who can progress deeper into the manosphere once they've kind of subscribed to that node. So I'm going to be looking at the women that like reflectively retro are able to look back and see that they were in a relationship with a man of the manosphere. And within this study, I'm not going to be like saying you have to have dated a man that was this specific identity, where red pilled or incel or anything of that sort. I'm mostly looking at, were you dating a man that had patriarchal or misogynistic views, negative views about women? And did they consume media that reinforced those viewpoints? That's all the Ranosphere really is you're taking in media that reinforces negative, harmful views about women, about feminism, and about just the state of gender dynamics in the current society. So I'm
Sure.
going to be interviewing those individuals because a lot of what we talk about with the manosphere, based upon the name itself, you can guess we really privilege and prioritize the narratives of men within those spaces.
Yeah.
And so with this project, I'm really working to decenter that perspective and look at how the actions of men are impacting those around us. Because there's only been one previous study done speaking to women and how they've been impacted as romantic partners with those in the manosphere.
That's so amazing. One of the things I really love about the research that you're doing, I think this was highlighted in some of the writing that you sent me beforehand. You know, it's one thing, and it seems to be kind of a common approach to studying these communities to look at postings, look at media, look at the sites that we're talking about, and not talk to people. Your work has really emphasized actually dialoguing, both now in your dissertation with romantic partners, but also the importance of dialoguing with participants in
Mhm.
sphere. Why is that approach important to
I
you?
think it's so important because, well, I think there's a methodological reason and I think there's also a human reason. So the methodological reason is like when you're conducting and gathering information through only those indirect pathways of informational gathering, you're not getting a full picture. People can lie very easily online. People can make things up very easily online, and there's a lot of room for interpretation when you're doing indirect information collection. Like especially with memes or something. If you don't understand the meme, you can apply one perhaps more harmful level of meaning to it where it may be meaning in something entirely different. And that's a way that I think a lot of false flags get raised within manosphere research communities, where we speak about the mass amount of men within the manospheres. They're all like one step away from committing mass acts of violence, where a lot of them are trolling, and it's their way of creating identity and self-expression. And that's the normative identity created within that space, is to troll, is to engage in that kind of mocking laughter as a way to consolidate identity within that space. And so by taking everything at face value, we're not only feeding the trolls, but we're not getting truth in our research.
Hmm.
And we're playing into the perhaps hyper masculinized narrative of what it means to be a man, and we're letting those individuals kind of get what they want, because if you're unable to achieve oftentimes true, like what we consider it societally to be masculinity, to be manhood through the traditional means, a lot of people will circumvent that and go to violence, whether that be rhetorical, verbal, physical violence, to achieve what the standards of masculinity. It's kind of the
Hmm.
trump card of masculinity. So if we are able to let them just take that and run with it without any further critical thought or discussion, we're giving them what they want, especially as researchers.
Wow. I think it's so
And
it also struck me. I'm sorry, were you going to say something else?
yeah, and also secondly, on a human level, I think
Yes.
that we're all more than the singular identity of
Uh-huh.
person in the manosphere, person that dated a manosphere. It's important to look at this specific moment in time in the context of a person's full life. And how did the circumstances of someone's entire life bring them to this point? How are these events constituting their identity with other events preceding them? And I want to take that holistic approach without making mass generalizations in my research.
Wow. As you say that, I mean, that makes me start to imagine all the things that your participants in your dissertation research will be able to tell you. I imagine a lot of what you're going to hear, a lot of the really valuable data that you're going to receive are going to be people saying, this man was so much more than that. He, all of that was true, but there's, but that's one dimension of the person that I was with. I think that's going to be so fascinating, just to read what you find in it. It also really struck me as you were speaking. I mean, the way the way researchers tend to do this research, looking at posts, looking at the static data without dialoguing with participants. I can only imagine how much that contributes to, I mean, this obvious divide that we have, between people and the academy. That's how we kind of become the enemy. We put ourselves on this pedestal as the researchers, and we're going to analyze this data. We're not going to talk to the people. We're not going to let them have their own voice. But we're going to look at what you've produced and written into the world, then we're going to tell you who you are and
Yeah.
everything. I think it's such amazing work, that you do, coming away from that and saying, no, you tell me, yeah, what this means and what this is, to you. It reminds me, in some of the writing you sent me, you talked a little bit about a book that I think was influential to both of us, in our coursework. I'll have to look up the author's name. I'll put it on the post here in the text. But this is why we can't have nice things. I remember was the name
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
kind of a book about trolling.
Hmm.
Uh, somebody who, I think probably influenced both of us a little bit in emphasizing, no, let's talk to the participants here and not rely on the static data that they leave behind,
Hmm.
um, these sites. I'll make sure I put a link um, to that book. Now, as we're thinking about this, that takes us to an experience that you've had and that we've talked about before. So this past spring, uh, I want you to tell the story, not me, but this past spring, you shared some of your research findings at an academic conference and found yourself the target of some abuse online. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that story and that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I presented a paper at, um, oh gosh, the name of the conference. I'm sorry. I go to so many. I was really excited about this conference because it was my first international conference. It was the Institute for Research on Male Supremacism. And I was super excited to be going to their conference because it's the first time I got to really interact with people that are doing my kind of research from around the globe. And it was an online conference, a virtual conference, and they it was, I think, conducted through Zoom. And so when it was time for our point to give our presentation, we would just hop in the Zoom room and give our speech. And I noticed at the time, but I didn't think too much of it. I was like, it's kind of odd that there are three people recording this presentation or this entire session. And I knew that like the conference itself was recording, but I didn't realize they were just letting anyone record it. So an individual got into or they chose to pay the money, register for the meeting, for the conference, get a Zoom link, hop in, and that individual was I think a YouTuber that did like was a female presenting YouTuber that did like commentary on how academics are just deeply out of touch. I think it was a far right site. I honestly can't say I've watched any of their work. I just found my face and I was like, yep, there's me, because they ended up recording the entire conference and like streaming it on YouTube to their viewers. And those individuals, of course, I don't think they gave a lot of commentary. I never watched what they said about me in that video because I didn't feel like it'd be productive for me. But I think they streamed most of the sessions of the conference and I guess gave light commentary, and there were people in the comments, of course, talking about things. And I got a lot of flack, my presentation in the comments, because I was talking about media. I was talking about how it is how it's a bad research practice to try and collect data purely from indirect streams of information. And I presented this idea by lodging a failed study that I'd done, a study where I was trying to gather meaning from indirect streams and showing how much confusion is involved with that process. And so I think everyone in the meeting itself, in the conference itself, understood what I was trying to get at, is how this is a commentary on a methodologic practice. But the individuals in that YouTube comment section took it as, ha ha ha, she can't get a meme. She's so dumb. She's so stupid. How could you not understand this? And I was trying, it was a moment, it was just a misunderstanding of like the intent of the paper, or not a misunderstanding, just a point where they wanted to like poke fun at me as a researcher for being methodologically reflexive in that moment. And it wasn't kind, it wasn't nice. And I ended up getting just in that, and nobody ever reached out to me personally, thankfully, through any direct means, but just in that comment section was not a lot of nice things about me, my intelligence, or my thoughts as a researcher. And it made me sad because I tried to be really gracious in that paper to them, in that presentation, um, that this is a moment where we're being too critical as researchers on people in manosphere sites. And we're not giving them enough grace and enough space to be full-bodied humans rather than just representations of text and images and memes. It
Yeah.
left me feeling pretty burned.
To be, oh, you came there to say, this is where we've got things wrong, and people stood and pointed and laughed, and you said, "Ha, she got things wrong."
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great like shorthand way of like that's exactly what happened. Was they were like, ha ha, you fool. You got it wrong. And I was like, I know, that's the point. Is we're doing it wrong. We need to do it better. And to do it better, we have to be methodologically vulnerable and reflexive about the ways that we can be better researchers. And we have to be kind to one another and kind to our participants as well, in order for us to keep respect and to keep open dialogues of communication in research.
I mean, it's just so ironic that they didn't realize. I mean, this might be a this might be a poorly chosen phrase to describe it, but in many ways, you were their friend in the room. You were advocating, for having, you know, you were advocating for making fewer assumptions, about people in that room. I mean, you weren't certainly not advocating for their viewpoint, not advocating for for the way of thinking, but you were advocating for their humanity and for their nuance and for the fact that as academics, we're not always seeing the whole picture on things. I mean, the irony is just tremendous.
It was, and I felt really, really hurt after that moment where I was trying, and like as you mentioned, I was trying to kind of advocate for their humanity, advocate for their personhood, and that we shouldn't treat them like as researchers, as people to just be surveilled and to have to like extract data from them. That's not an ethical thing to do with any group of participants. Whether or not we agree with their viewpoints as researchers, that doesn't negate our research ethics. We shouldn't be doing that. We need to let the
Absolutely.
communities that we study have a hand in how we study them, what we study, and how those findings are interpreted. And I think that experience might, I hope not, but could potentially turn people off from doing that sort of research, for trying to engage with that population.
Yeah, from what you observe, for reasons like that, is it difficult for people to do this research long term?
Absolutely. It's so difficult to do research long term, not only with people that engage in trolling, like I got trolled, or but it's also difficult to constantly be asked to empathize with people in the manosphere that don't seem to have any empathy for you. And you're constantly called to rise above it as a researcher and to continue to put your best foot forward and advocate for a better understanding of these populations. But it's hard when you let yourself go home at the end of the night and you're no longer a researcher, you're a human, and they don't like the human that you are, and you're trying to advocate for them. And it's challenging and it's very lonely because there are a lot of people, at least in my department. As you mentioned, I feel no negative competition with the people in the department. I feel so much kinship with everyone in the department, but it's very lonely to be in a hostile research environment,
Sure.
when most everyone else is excited to wake up and research and learn more. It's hard to want to get up and go to your computer and go see like really negative stuff all day, every day, and hear mean things about yourself. It's not fun and it burns people out. And
Yeah.
so I know a lot of people that do this kind of work will do it for a cycle of their career and they'll move on to something else
Yeah.
because it just eats away at them. They no longer enjoy their research. And it can also get to the point of like safety issues, things where they no longer feel safe in their personhood or online.
Yeah. Wow. So I don't want to put you on the spot. This isn't something that we talked about beforehand. So if this goes nowhere, it goes nowhere, and that's okay. Um, you know, one thing that we have in common as researchers, I mean, to different degrees, absolutely, but so we have, in a lot of ways, our research interests involve communication among people who see researchers and academics as the enemy.
Mhm.
With you, you do research in the manosphere. I do research among evangelicals. In a lot of ways, for good reasons or bad reasons, justified or not justified. We've talked about some of the reasons already. That sometimes that can be the case. Researchers have a history. Sometimes of taking static data and saying, okay, now let me tell you who you are, with it.
Mhm.
There are reasons why this is the case, why people have come to this conclusion. Do you have any thoughts, when you're approaching, when you're researching, when you're talking to people who see researchers and academics as the enemy, how do you how do you approach communicating, I am not the enemy. I am not your enemy. Do you have any guidance for me, for us, in doing.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'd love to hear other advice on that as well. But I think approaching it as a human first and consider that it always helps me to think that I know I've had members of the manosphere probably in my classrooms as an educator, as a teacher, but I would never know. And I still am able to communicate and work with those individuals because we all have a shared sense of humanity. It helps me to think that, like, the people that I'm studying are they're humans just like me. We all have the same desires. We all have the same wants. If we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we all fit that hierarchy. All of us want to feel safe. We want to feel like we belong. We want to have like feel like our life has purpose. And so when I look back and I try to work with individuals, I remember that they're seeking the same things that I am. We all have the same goals in this world. And whether or not they get twisted or covered in layers of anger, of hurt. We all want to feel understood. And
Hmm.
sometimes when people abuse that trust as researchers or that extension of understanding, it creates a lot of people can become jaded. And I it's understandable, it's reasonable, it's rational for people to engage in that way. I understand really on a cognitive level why the manosphere resents researchers. If I were an individual that lived their life and was in their shoes, I would feel the same way. And being able to connect and understand the reasons why we're not trusted is the only way that we're able to go through, rectify those reasons, and to try and create understanding.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I think that's really well stated. So we talked earlier. You recently received an award recognizing your excellent service to the Department of Communication here at the University of Memphis. Now, and when we talk about your service, I know I've seen a lot of that in action, and I'm betting there's a lot of it I haven't even seen. I mean, what stands out. I mean, first of all, you took a position last year, just assisting uh, us graduate assistants, with our needs, serving as an advisor to younger graduate assistants. I mean, that's a big job for which you received essentially no money. I mean, there was compensation of a kind, but not really. To be truthful. I mean, from day one with our cohort, from the first day we came in, you were the point person in so many ways, getting communication out there. I mean, you were the graduate representative, with the department. So I mean, in formal ways and in informal ways, you were doing this from day one. What what drives you? Do you think, what's been behind that drive of emphasizing service within the department?
I feel like on an existential level, all of us are on the planet to better the lives of those around us. And that's my fundamental belief. And I try in small ways to help people and just it really fuels me to be of service to others, to be somebody that is able to give back. And I also have a lot of empathy for younger cohorts. And that was a big reason why I took the position was because I wish I had somebody that was able to sit in my classroom, tell me what I was doing well, give me some perspective as someone that was an observer. I wish I had somebody that was trying to bring people in and create community events. I wish that I had somebody that was trying to set up forums for me to share my research with professors to try and figure out who's interested in my work, to figure out who I can put on my committee. I wish I had those resources. And I feel like our when we were in our first year, we really didn't for the most part. So it was really important to me that I set those things up, not just because it's a real resume builder, but it's also something that I just wanted to better the experience of those in the more junior cohorts based
Mhm.
upon my experiences and create a better create a better graduate environment because graduate school can be really lonely. It can be like really isolating because you have to take on the dual identities of student and professor as a teaching assistant. And that leaves you in a world of limbo where there's very few people that understand the unique experience that you're going through. And all of those people are pretty localized to your department.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, we don't have many times when we get together aside from classes, aside from like a gathering at the beginning of the year. And those touch points help us remember that we're not in it alone, that we do have a community around us.
Yeah. Absolutely. I can only imagine how huge it's been. I mean, I come at this program, with the privilege of, a wife and family here that I come home to. But I remember, I mean, I did an MA program right after my bachelor's, and it was shocking how quickly, I mean, when you're, at least my experience as an undergrad was there was scaffolding around me, and all kinds of
Mhm.
unity around me in all kinds of different forums, and it was shocking to go to a different educational venue, and there was just so little of that comparatively speaking. So I just can't imagine what a huge gift it's been to have you putting together those things, particularly, I mean, for me, even with all of that, even with all of the things that I have around me, but I can only imagine for the people who come, you know, straight from a bachelor's program or from a master's program. I just can only imagine what a gift the things that you've done have been for them. So thank you so much for all you've done. I hope you feel like you can speak frankly to this. Do you feel like service, departmental survey? You mentioned it's a resume builder, and I'm sure it is to a certain extent, but there's a lot of ways you can choose to spend your time as as a PhD student. You could have been pouring that time into research. You could have been pouring that time, into other things. Do you feel like service is valued?
No, I don't think it is when you look at it from a job market perspective, especially coming out of my PhD program. I look back and I feel a lot of the times like a fool for pouring so much time into departmental service because that's time I should have put into research. It's time I should have put into maybe sharpening teaching, but it just wasn't what motivated me. It wasn't what I felt compelled to do because I guess there are three real prongs to being an academic. There's your research, your teaching, and your service. And a lot of the times people are hiring in those orders. They look at your research, they look at your teaching, and then maybe if they make it to the end of of your CV, they'll look at your service.
Right. If it's a,
And
what's the tie? It's a tiebreaker, kind of.
yeah, it's you're not going to get hired a lot of places for your service, which is tough. It really comes down to your research oftentimes. And I don't know. I've always felt like is a really solitary activity, whereas service, I really enjoyed that act of connecting with people, that act of like bringing people together. It meant so much to me. And it was something that I'm glad I did it I'm glad I did it, but looking back, I shouldn't have.
Well, if it is meaningful to you at all, I don't think you're a fool at all for having done it. I think that, you know, it was living into your values of, it's you said it before, we're here to make life a little bit better for the people around us. And I tell you straight up, you have done that as a part of your work in the department here. You have enriched my life greatly through the things
Oh,
that you have done.
Jeff.
And um, so, for whatever it's worth, if it means anything at all, I tell you, you are not a fool for the ways you've spent your time. And if I guess to go beyond that, I think your research is outstanding as well. I mean, I would put you up there, with anybody in our department in terms of the work that you're doing, research wise. I just can't wait, to see what you're. I mean, this is a dissertation that's going to do good in real and tangible ways. Um, I think I know we could say the same thing about our colleagues in the department as well. But your research stands alongside all of ours, and it's certainly none the lesser for the service work you've done, and the service work you've done really is unparalleled, in the department. So thank you so much for the work that you've done. Um, and I think if, to the extent that it's undervalued, I mean, that is sad for the academy, that it is because we need Diana Humbles, doing it. I mean, if nobody picks up the work you've done after we graduate this year, our department will be worse for it. And, um, I'm talking too much to be doing an interview right now, but
No, I appreciate it. Yeah. Because I think you're right. When we look at service, that's the thing that not only our peers, but our students also remember. They'll remember us coming into the classroom. They'll remember us like having a good slide. Remember us having like good PowerPoints, good slides, but that mentorship, that personal investment, sitting on someone's committee, writing them the letter of recommendation, taking those steps beyond the bare minimum is what makes that I think it's what makes this experience so enriching for students. And I think sometimes we can lose that amidst all of the need for publications, the need to go to conferences, and all of those things take so much time, as well as your teaching, putting together great pedagogy takes a lot of time. It's super important. And I think service a lot of the time falls to the wayside, even though just because it doesn't have like the tangible metrics attached to it, it doesn't mean it's less valuable. It's the thing I remember most from my undergrad was how involved and how well I felt served by my advisors, by my and by the entirety of the faculty at Waldorf.
absolutely. So tell us, now we're getting to the end of the program here. Bittersweet, in a lot of ways. Um, when you walk across that stage this spring or this summer, and uh, once you have the PhD in hand, what's next for Dr. Humble after
You
you're out of
know,
here?
I'm still not sure. I'm still not sure whether I'm going to be going into academia, whether I'm going to industry. I think it comes down to like right job, right time. I hesitate. It's hard to come to grips with like that. I'm kind of letting go of the dream of academia in a lot of ways. Where I came to this program, I came to Memphis from my little hometown of Minnesota alone because I wanted to become a professor, because I wanted to engage with students. And I think for a myriad of reasons since I've gotten to Memphis, that dream has started to slip away and become something I feel like I should want, but I no longer do.
Hmm.
And I'm leaning towards industry at this point because, well, outside of the social political scheme around academia, jobs are becoming scarce. You have to do more in order to become a really competitive applicant, and it's
Yeah.
hard. I feel like in a lot of ways it's a challenge none of us knew we needed to be prepared for coming into this hiring market. So I'm definitely looking for alternate opportunities. which is going to be tough because I like being in the classroom. I like being able to like touch students' lives
Hmm.
and share a little bit about what I'm passionate about, but I think I can do just as much good in industry and make just as much of a difference there.
Oh, I don't doubt it at all. Anywhere, I know this. I don't know where you're heading. I don't know if you're heading for the classroom. I don't know if you're heading for the boardroom. But wherever you go, you know, they're going to be so lucky to have you. It's going to be tremendous to see how you continue to, again, as you said, to make the lives of the people around you better, through the things that you're doing. Can't wait to see it because you're doing it already.
Thank you,
And
Jeff.
it's going to be tremendous to see. Yeah, as we come to the close of our time here, we've already touched, I think, on a lot of things here, but any any words of advice for people who are a little bit not quite as far along the research journey or the graduate school journey as you are? Anything that you would say to them, words of wisdom?
I would encourage people to not give up too many pieces of their identity for their graduate degree. I say that because I look back across the my academic experience and I had the false idea that to be a good student I had to be wholly dedicated to my studies and my entire self. So I let go of a lot of activities that made me happy. Like I used to play the trumpet for a long time from like fourth grade up until my second year of my undergraduate degree. And it was something that I really enjoyed, and I was also kind of good at it. I got to be first chair in my college's wind symphony. And there came a point where I had to let it go because it was just taking up too much time and the opportunity cost I couldn't justify. And so I quit. And it was something I missed ever since I left it. And I continued to do that, let go of those things that gave me joy over the years, piece by piece, until I got to, I guess, last year, my third year of the doctoral program. And I just felt so academically fragile. Like any piece of rejection I got could just ruin my day on a paper, on a research study, whatever it may be, because I tied so much of my identity to my academic work and I felt deeply bound to it in a way that made me very fragile. I didn't have many other pegs to my identity, like a stool standing up. I just had the one peg. And if you kicked that peg out, I fell over. And so it was really important to me to purposefully put those pegs back in place to help myself stay balanced. And it was a small thing, but it's something that I'm really grateful I did, was I sought out and I joined a community band where last year, I get to play my trumpet in the band again. And it's not about being amazing at it. It's not about being the best in the world at it like it sometimes it feels you have to be in academia. It's about I get to go there every week and I get to play my trumpet and there are people that know me just as Diana, not as Professor Humble, not as a researcher, and I'm valued just as Diana. And that's really important to me. And I hope that anyone listening keeps those pegs of their identity in place as well, and maybe adds a few more, because graduate
Oh,
school is going to end for all of us at some point,
that's
whether
right.
in some way or some fashion. And you need to have an identity that endures beyond that.
Wow. Oh, Diana, this has been so rich, and I think we're not going to get a better moment to close our time on. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Uh, what a tremendous uh, young woman you are, and I just so enjoyed being in the program with you. I'm gonna start losing it here in a minute, so I'm gonna thank you so much for your time
Well,
today.
thank you for having me, Jeff. It's been a pleasure to not only be in the program with you, but to get to chat with you today as well.